I have traveled and lived over almost all the countries in Africa, mostly with family. South Africa and Kenya were some of our favorite ones. In this video, I'll continue to give you the tea. Which country is better, South Africa or Kenya? Let's go.
Safety and security. There is nowhere in this world that is totally safe. Whether you are in maybe Japan, right? I think Japan is quite safe, but okay. I don't think there's any part in this world where you're totally safe, right? I mean, Japan does have earthquakes, right? They might be safe, but they sit on 3 tectonic plates, right? So first of all, I'll start with South Africa. When I was moving to South Africa, everybody said, Dexter, you gotta be careful. South Africa is dangerous. Lucky Dube was killed. A lot of people have been killed by they're trying to steal their cars and they get killed. So people are like, Dexter, you just gotta be careful. So I went into South Africa thinking that, man, there was gonna be a raid around. When I got there, I was like totally disappointed, right? It was peaceful, it was calm, it was not as bad, right? I did experience a couple of breakouts. I remember a time that somebody snatched the phone from my car when I was driving. I was in traffic and was talking to me right here, and he went around the other way and snatched my car that was seated at the other passenger's seat, right? And it was like, boom, and I was totally caught off guard, right? That happened to me in South Africa, not in a very dodgy area of South Africa, right in Durban, right? It's a safe area, right? So when that happened, there's a lot of carjacking, there's a lot of places in South Africa that you go to. When you start to see the crowd feel closer, when the density, right, the population density starts to become higher, then you gotta start becoming careful. If you live in a place like Umhlanga, Sandton, it's a bit safe, but even in those areas, there are pockets of hijacks that happen. So you gotta be careful, So South Africa is one of those countries that you're always sort of on the edge. It's bougie, it's nice, but you gotta be careful. And the more you get into areas that are close, knitted with a crowd of people, you just gotta be careful. You gotta watch your back, So that's what I figured out in South Africa. In Kenya, on the other hand, when I moved here, I could drive with my windows down. This is one of the countries where I drive my windows down. Initially, at some point, my wife was like, you're driving with your windows down, how? But it just feels safe. Within 2-3 weeks of living here, she was doing the same thing because people sell in traffic. There are cases where people can take your phone and all of that, but it's not as intense like you feel in South Africa. In South Africa, you're a bit scared to even do that, right? But Kenya was good. I felt very, very safe in Kenya. I could go to Kibera, right, which is like the biggest slum in Africa, right? And I could feel safe. And I did a lot of those things because anytime I travel countries, right, it's not about living in those high areas. I really wanted to get to the grassroots. I would go to Kibera, I'd feel very safe, right? I'd feel comfortable. I'd eat food by the roadside. I'd feel totally safe. I'd eat mutura. I've done a lot in Kenya, right? And a lot of these times, there was even a day I went out from my car, I took my laptop on my bag, right? And I was eating matura on the streets. It was like, whoa, I can't do that in South Africa. When I go with my phone in town in South Africa, I'm like, keep my hands in my pocket. In Kenya, I could flex. With my laptop, I could chat with the people, I could, So there's just a level of peace that you feel in South Africa. In Kenya. When I got to Kenya as well, it's one of the areas where you see white people, right, actually riding motorcycles as well. They get onto borders, right? Borders, motorcycles. They take taxis, right? And they get onto a bike. Hey, take me there. And you see white guys drive it. Indian guys get on it. In South Africa, you can never see a white person on a bike. It's not possible. It's not even possible. It's not, first of all, it's not safe for them. Then it's also not in their class. There's just something about it, right? But Kenya feels very, very safe. It's one of the countries that I've lived in the last 10 years. And I've totally felt safe, in Kenya. So there's something really, really great in Kenya going on with safety and with and security. So I'll give you another dimension. We had 2 cars in South Africa. Over here in Kenya, we had 1 car. So at certain times, we needed to pick up the kids. And we say, okay, who's going to pick up the kids? Either my wife has to go, sometimes I'm running late. Then I'll just tell my wife, let's get a Bolt, let's get a Uber to pick up the kids. The first time we got here, we're like, how can you send an Uber to get the kids? But in Kenya, people can actually be at work and get an Uber they trust, go pick up the kids, and they drop them in their house. Boom. Nothing happens. It's safe. The Uber guys are careful with the kids. It's amazing. Some schools, actually, you can tell the schools, an Uber is coming to pick up my kid. You give the number of the details. The Uber driver will take your kid from school home, and you can relax and be sure that it is going to be done. In South Africa, you can't do that. Even in South Africa, when I'm careful. You cannot do that with kids in South Africa. In Joburg, in Durban, in Cape Town. No, don't even try it. But in Kenya, there is just this level of we watch after each other. Your kid is my kid. We're on the same level. You might have more money than me, but it doesn't mean that you're a threat to me or that you took away from me or you punished me. In South Africa, there is a lot of that post-traumatic inequality, right? That had come through from the past. So you really don't know who to trust, right? Who can be upset, who can just really, so I can't do that, right? So in South Africa, you want to be careful. In terms of security and safety, Kenya, hands down. Safe, secure, best place to live. If that's what you're looking for, that's what you want to go for. So security and safety, Kenya wins that, hands down. Boom. Now, healthcare, right? When you have kids, and also when you're also generally, you want to make sure that wherever you live as a country, you have good hospitals, you have great doctors. It's one of the key things you want to think about, especially if you're coming from a place like the US, where there is great hospitals, or Europe as well. So for us, when we're going to these countries, we didn't necessarily know what to expect. We're benchmarking it with West Africa, benchmarking it with the US as well. When we got into South Africa, great hospitals, great doctors, a lot of Indian doctors. You see a lot of Indian doctors in South Africa. It's almost like the Indians are, when they were born, it's like, you're going to be a doctor, so you see a lot of Indian doctors, right? I think a lot of black doctors have come up, but Indians are like, boom, boom, Indian doctors everywhere. A few white doctors as well. I think a lot of white doctors as well, depending on the hospital, but there are a lot of good doctors in South Africa. Facilities for operations, surgeries, cardiologists, really, really great specialists, and you don't struggle to find them, right? And even at the different tiers of hospital, whether it's a higher tier hospital, a tier 2 hospital, they're really, really good facilities is what I find out, and then it's accessible, right? It's accessible at an affordable cost, for the people, almost, as a matter of fact, it's free, right? Some hospitals you have to wait a while and queue, but it's free, right? So that's something really, really lovely in South Africa. You really feel good, for those things. A lot of people across Africa come to South Africa for treatments and all. So South Africa's hospital treatment and healthcare is really, really good. Where access to drugs, or access to medicine, right? I mustn't say drugs. Once I said drugs when I was in South Africa, and I was telling a police officer I went to buy drugs at that chemist. He was like, "You went to buy drugs?" Because in South Africa, when you say drugs, they actually think it's like cocaine and that kind of stuff. And I was coming out and I was telling this guy, I went to buy drugs in that chemist, and he was coming close to arrest me. I remember, oh my goodness. I told him, oh, I didn't go to buy drugs. I went to buy medicine at that chemist. So like, okay, I got you. So just don't call drugs medicine when you're in South Africa. Medicine is not drugs, and drugs is not medicine. I found out that in South Africa, if you want to get medicine, you need a doctor's prescription for antibiotics and all of that stuff, right? So every single time you need antibiotics, you need to go to a doctor. So that promotes the healthcare system as well, and also watches the level of antibiotics resistance in the country, Flip side for Kenya's health base is not so bad. I would tell you that they have good doctors, good hospitals. There's the Nairobi Hospital, Nairobi West Hospital, there's Aga Khan. They're really good hospitals here as well, But when you come to the middle class hospitals and you compare them to the middle class hospitals in South Africa, they're not as good. The South African hospitals are bougier, a bit more developed than the middle class ones here. Over these ones in Kenya, you have to hustle a bit. You can feel that it's I think they need to treat it better. It needs to be a bit more pristine, a bit more clean, a bit more doctors that can really get the people going through the crowd really much faster. There's some really good hospitals in East Africa. Kenya is known as the hub for medical care. People come from Uganda, people come from Tanzania to Kenya. So when I say the healthcare is not as great as South Africa, it's not because it's bad. It's just because it doesn't measure up to what I feel in South Africa. I remember a lot of these things I'm saying are subjective. You might come and say, you know what, there's a doctor in Kenya that really treated me and he was the best guy. I'm looking at it from a personal perspective, but also from a general perspective as well, right? From the class of everybody, top down and all. So healthcare is better in South Africa. One thing you will enjoy in Kenya, however, is access to medication and drugs, right? You can get drugs over the counter. Anything you want, you will get it over the counter. Whether it's high blood pills, Pritsum, all of that stuff, right? Whether you want antibiotics, no matter how strong it is, just go to the chemist. He'll give it to you. I liked that, right? Now, I'll tell you why I liked it, right? I mean, earlier in my life, right, I grew up in Nigeria, right, and lived in Nigeria as well. And there was a lot of self-prescription, right? If you thought you were having malaria symptoms, you could just suddenly go to the pharmacy. You didn't even tell the pharmacy, I feel like I have malaria symptoms. You just go to the pharmacy and just say, I want malaria drugs. Give me chloroquine, or give me maloxine, or give me, you just did that. So that was the kind of life I grew up with, right? Where I knew what was wrong with me when I could feel it. I got a few bites from mosquitoes, and then I just know, yeah, it's gotta be malaria, right? When I got to South Africa, I knew what was wrong with me, right? Maybe I was feeling like I needed antibiotics, but I would go to the chemist and I couldn't get it. I had to go to a doctor, and the doctor would still at the end of the day tell me antibiotics. I'm like, but I knew that. But I had to pay him, I had to do that. So I found out that it was not so quick for me, right? So I didn't like that. But in Kenya, oh my goodness, it reminded me back in the days, right? I just felt I was feeling a bit ill. I just jumped. Give me what I need, and I just get it, right? So it was easy and the kids as well, it was easy. I could just sort of, there was some times I had to go to the doctors, and we did go to the doctors a lot, but you could always tell what was wrong, right? So you could get all those prescriptions, very easily, right? So when it comes to healthcare, I'll give it to South Africa, but Kenya is not so far off back. Remember, you can always get free medicine over the counter. Now, another thing you want to think about is the economy. Two of the fastest growing economies in Africa, Kenya and South Africa, have been growing quite well. The currencies have been holding up relatively well compared to other African countries, right? If you look at Nigeria, the currency is devalued, Ethiopia is devalued, but Kenya and South Africa are still holding strong. As a matter of fact, South Africa is almost trying to have a back turn, right? Especially since the GNU and it came in. We're seeing a little bit of appreciation in the rand, right? But it's held very strongly, right? So the economy in these two countries are quite strong. A lot of exports, a lot of imports. In some of the countries, we're still net importers, right? So net importers of resource. But there's a lot of economic growth in the countries. The GDPs are growing, and they've been doing that consistently through the years, despite all of the VUCA environments and complexities that we see. So South Africa and Kenya are very strong. The middle class is emerging and going wider and wider. What that means is suddenly people have enough funds to be able to access products and services, right? And that takes me to business opportunity. If you're coming to these countries and you're thinking, I don't want to just live here. I also want to start a business. I want to think about what to do. Then South Africa and Kenya are perfect. You can come in here and you would blossom. It's much easier to start a business in Kenya or South Africa than it is even in the US, than it is in Europe, right? This is where you blow, like we say in Africa. You can come in here and you can blow, right? The opportunities are massive. And that's why every single time you see the Chinese coming in, you see the Americans, you see the British, everybody's coming to Africa, right? So if you're not coming there, you got to be coming, right? And of course, if you're African and you're going away, you got to think about it. Everybody's coming. Why are you going? Well, why are you not thinking about investing? So, economic opportunities are big in these countries. When I look at Kenya is a market where to start a business, you can do it online. You can do it very fast with the registration services. You can do it online. You don't have to go anywhere. It's very easy to start up your registration and go. If you have a business permit, you have a work permit, then you're able to really register those things, right? A lot of times you would need the help of a local because they want one of the shareholders to be a local, so that gives a lot of empowerment to the country as well, and just protects the locals, and protects Kenya as well. So you see that happen as well. In South Africa, you don't necessarily need a local all the time, but you definitely need your business permits and you need all of that good stuff to be able to go through. Or you need a PR, or you need a temporary visa, right? Or something that allows you to operate as a business. And you can register that very fast as well. In South Africa, you find out, however, there is a lot more regulatory requirements that you have to go through. Registrations, sometimes if you want to sell on Take a Lot sometimes ask you for certain requirements. You need to have batch numbers, you need to have expiry dates, you need to have some certain documentations, right? I know it's becoming a bit easier right now, and Take a Lot is letting it go, but I think there's a lot of that. In Kenya, it's a bit easier. There is KIBS that holds you accountable as well. But the people in Kenya realize that they want to be able to grow the economy, so they support each other. When you're a small startup, they want to buy from you because they know it protects and it grows Kenya. So some people buy it because it's locally made in Kenya, right? They know it's not made in a factory that has the high-end gadgets and manufacturing capacity, but they're like, whoa. So there's a lot of startups, you see it in Kenya, right? The hustle is real. You see even the person in the middle class, he is having a business. The other day I was filling up my car with fuel, at Shell, a petrol station in Kenya. And the guy that was the fuel attendant, right, that was pouring fuel into my car, right, he was talking to me and he says, he got on the phone at some point, and I told him, why are you on the phone and giving me petrol at the same point? And he said, I was talking to my barber. I was like, what do you mean your barber? He said he has a small barbing saloon where somebody cuts hair and he makes money every week. But he was a fuel attendant. But he had a business barbing saloon somewhere in an area, right? And I was amazed. Because a lot of people you're working and all of your money you're thinking about is coming from that organization, coming from that business. But this was a fuel attendant and he was hustling. Everybody in Kenya sort of has a side hustle. You know, you don't just have one thing you do, right? You gotta be married to like 3 different things, right? So when I got into Kenya, it was amazing, right? You see people that are comfortable, but they just want more. You see people that are not comfortable, but they want more. You see people that are at the bottom. So I was blown away, right? I was inspired. You know, in South Africa, it's different. In South Africa, you have one job, you're comfortable, you're cozy. It's a little bit of this entitlement mindset, right? You don't hustle, you don't jump. So there's a lot more. If you really want to get into businesses, there's a lot of opportunity here in Kenya. There's also the amount of money spent per good. I find it higher in Kenya than it is in South Africa. So I tend to feel that you can make better margins and better profits on products in Kenya than you can make in South Africa. Because remember I said the cost of living in South Africa is a bit lower than Kenya. So that means the price of goods are cheaper, which means that your production cost has to be so much low to be able to match that kind of margin that you're making in Kenya. So those are the things. When I think about business opportunities, I would say that Kenya has a huge opportunity in that space. However, if you're thinking about high-end tech projects, things that maybe cater for your massive high LSM, then you have some people in South Africa that can really get into that area as well. But when you think about big opportunity, I'll give it to Kenya. I think when it comes to business, I think business opportunities would blossom more in Kenya when you think about it. You know, you see a lot of startups from services that have gone through. It's also this free playing ground, right? Where you can really play. Your competition is a bit flatter than it is in South Africa. Remember, in South Africa, you're going up against some of the people that have had funds for years, before Mandela, before pre-apartheid. So a lot of these people are capitalists, right? And they command a lot of economic power. So imagine you're a middle-class person trying to compete with that. You're really going to struggle, right? But in Kenya, I find it a bit flat. You can compete without having this disadvantage that you would see in South Africa as a result of apartheid and all of that economic disparity that was caused from those pre-periods, you know. So that's what I feel. Now, in terms of culture, right, which is another dynamic, I'll look at it. For me, culture is the way of life. In what country out of these two would you find the way of life easier to adapt to, that you'll find more amenable? I think that the culture in Kenya is very free. The people warm up to you. The people are happy to help you. They don't see you as a competition, as a threat. When you come into Kenya, the first words you learn are karibu, which means you're welcome. You learn the asante sana, which is like thank you. Those are words. In South Africa, I've lived there for a while, but I still don't know what your welcome means, right? You know, and I think about it now. I know karibu, right? Maybe because I've just lived in Kenya more recently, right? But when I think about it, in South Africa, what does your welcome mean? I know the whole thank you thing, but you don't hear that a lot, right? And it's just because in South Africa, there is so much resentment from the past, and there's so much division, right? And there's so much diversity. So a lot of people still carry a lot of hidden pain. You know, they might not show it a lot, but it's still in there, right? And you can feel it, right? Everybody is sort of, you know, watching themselves and trying to be careful. There's still a little bit of segregation. There's some white clubs, black clubs, Indian clubs. I mean, when I got to South Africa the other time, I was first going to a club. I think a club somewhere in, was it North Coast or was it, no, I think it was somewhere in between Umhlanga and Durban North. And I was going there and I'm like, Dexter, that's an Indian club. I was like, what's an Indian club? And I said, it's an Indian. I was like, oh my goodness, you know, so they have those kind of things, right? And there's some clubs that you go there and it's all house throughout. So I found the culture in South Africa a bit not as welcoming as Kenya, you know, because of that, right? And I couldn't blame, at some point I found it tough, but I couldn't necessarily blame the people because I understood where they were coming from, right? It's a tough story, right? In Kenya, on the other hand, oh my goodness, from day one, I was welcome. By the way, I got into Kenya and I was driving right from the next day. It was good, you know, it was really good. So I think the culture is really so I think the culture is really amazing in Kenya when it comes to compared to South Africa. So you really want to think about those things. So if you're having kids, you're coming in and you're a foreigner, you're coming to a new country, you want to think about it. Can you overcome it, right? In South Africa, you definitely can, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to get to South Africa and suddenly feel like everybody hates me, everybody hates Chris. That's Chris, you're not Chris, right? I think you're going to do well. People are still going to be able to blend. You just have to be aware of it and you would have a really great time. Kenya, however, you can go naked and everybody like, whoa, we love you, you're just really good, it's good. So just know how to move through. So in terms of culture, I give it to Kenya, right? But I'll give it to Kenya. Culture and acceptance and all of that, Kenya is the place to be. South Africa has gone through a lot of baggage. There's xenophobia areas, there's Duduzila in Cape Town where they're pushing against Zimbabwe. It's a lot, right? So you want to be aware about that. So if you're going to go into South Africa, I always tell foreigners, get the right papers, go in there happy, the right legal way, and you have a great life. But if you go in the wrong way, you're always going to be looking behind, looking over your shoulders, right? It's almost going to be like you're in America without a visa, right? You don't want that, right? You want to just live a life, right? So if you're going to South Africa, go with the right papers. Do not go there and make your life miserable or make theirs miserable as well, is what I would say. But Kenya, boom, you're the winner. Culture. Okay, guys. So with this one, right, I think Africa is an amazing place to live. A lot of friends, a lot of colleagues I have moved from the US, from Europe, coming to Africa because you earn a little bit of dollars in the West and you can live like kings right here, right? If you are African, right, and you've gone abroad, you have a huge opportunity to come back because the quality of life you can live here is amazing and you're spoiled for choice. Whether it's South Africa, whether it's Kenya, I think a lot of people that are living in Africa, they want to go back to their home countries. I see a Nigerian that says, you know what, I want to go back home to Nigeria. I see a Kenyan that says, I want to go back home to Kenya because a Kenyan living in the US is what I mean, right? Or a Kenyan living in Europe or in the UK. I think we need to come to a level where you just want to come to Africa. It doesn't matter where you're going. You could be a Kenyan and you're going to South Africa because you think you want to come back home, but South Africa is the place. You might be a South African and you say, you know what, I want to go to Kenya. Africa is flat. If you get the right documentation, you can live a really good quality of life in any of these countries. So when I think about the results, right, and say who wins, Kenya or South Africa, I think when you look at the scores and the tally, I think the winner is Kenya. Kenya has more points because of the reasons I have just spoken, right? Kenya, I think, is a better place to raise your kids, to live as family, to really grow and to really blossom and to grow independently as a business, right? And to really get yourself economically stable is the place you want to go. So those are my views. If you think you have other views that you think feel free to drop a comment in the chat. Let's know. Your views might be different. You might have a different opinion, on why this might be. And it might help somebody else that is reading the chat right there to say, maybe that's a different opinion, right? Maybe you're looking at it from a single person. You're looking at it from an area of a religious view. Drop it in the chat. Let's know. Your views might be different, but I think these views have been very robust based on my years in Africa and every single thing that you would need to know. So yeah, I would say, hey, Africa continues to rise and Africa is rising. This is the land where we gotta be. So I'll see you guys in the next video. So just check out the next video. I'll see you guys in the next video and let's continue to build the continent together. Africa is rising and Africa can rise.